Okay? If you do it for purely a worldly reason, is that sincere or not? Is it sincere? Anyone? The sisters are unusually quiet today.
Still sincere because you're still asking Allah even though it's for the worldly reason.
Yeah. So it is sincere because you're asking from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But are you doing it for the sake of Allah? Not like the first or second. The first person was doing it seeking Allah Himself. Right? The second level, someone did it for the sake of Allah, seeking His reward in the hereafter. Right? The third level, he just did it for, oh Allah, I need the taxi fare. Oh Allah, make me pass my exams. Oh Allah, Zubaydah says, oh Allah, inspire Zubayr to finally go meet my father. Okay? That's a lower level intention. It's still sincere, but it's lower level sincerity. Okay? It's lower level sincerity. So, the pure sincerity is to really direct one's intention, is to magnify one's intention, right? The least is to consider the reward in one's action. And shall the brothers just move forward a little bit? To really reflect on seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what about the reward? Right? The way to make a sincere intention, right, is to see the reward as being from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So I'm doing it purely for the sake of Allah. Seeking His love, His closeness, His love and His good pleasure, and the reward that He has promised, which is an expression of Allah's love and good pleasure. Right? 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 So as Sayyid Rabi al-Adawiyya said, لَيْسَ لِي, right? said, لَسْتُ أُرِيدُ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ نَعِيمًا, I do not seek paradise for its pleasures, but rather, أُرِيدُهَا لِأَرَاكَ, I seek it because that's where I will behold you. Right? So when it comes to seeking knowledge, one needs to give thought to making one's intention genuinely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a struggle. And that is a struggle. How does one work on that struggle? One works on that struggle by formulating one's intentions. By formulating one's intentions. And by asking ourselves the question, how will I seek the pleasure of Allah through this action? And that's what's called ta'addudun niyyah, multiple intentions. Okay? So the ulama tell us to have sincere intention, but they also tell us to have multiple intentions. How do you do that? Because a sincere intention is when it's purely for the sake of Allah. So how can you have multiple intentions? How would you have multiple intentions with a sincere intention?
Maybe if you have, like let's say you're trying to build a community for the Muslims to kind of live in peace in that place, but it's also asking Allah to gain the kind of the ability to build that community, establish ways of having peace in there.
So what was the intention there?
So the intention is to build a community so they can be sincere believers.
No, but that's an indirect intention. A sincere intention when it's for the sake of Allah. Okay? And that's why it requires effort. Right? That's why we're spending some time thinking about it. That a sincere intention is when you if you were asked, why am I doing this? The first, the intention is what drives an action. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for Allah. Right? And you see this even in something as human as feeding people. Right? The righteous believers are described in the Quran, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We feed you only for the sake of Allah. And it doesn't come naturally. See someone hungry, why do we feed them? Why would you feed someone who's hungry? Because they're hungry. But the Quran says don't feed them because they're hungry. Why do you feed them? إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. We feed you only. إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ. We feed you only for the sake of Allah. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً. We see no reward from you. وَلَا شُكُورًا. And no gratitude.
Because some time back when I'm the Buddhist, and we were talking about the same thing, and I said I would do it for the sake of Allah, but he said, what's Allah you're talking about? This man is hungry, he needs food. We don't know anything about Allah, so we give it, because this man is hungry. So, it sort of distinguishes the intention of a Muslim and a person who is unaware of Allah.
Yeah. No, because we know, So yeah. So this requires effort, right? The error we make in much of what we do is we put Allah second, right? Like, okay, why does Zubaydah want to marry Zubayr? So we go to Zubaydah. Zubaydah, why do you want to marry Zubayr? So Zubaydah said, well, I want to marry him because he's a good guy, he's a practicing Muslim, he's annoying, but we get along. So why are you marrying him? Oh, well, for the sake of Allah. Right? But there's all these reasons, and where does Allah come in it? Right? He is secondary. Since that's weak sincerity. The sincerity would be that if Zubaydah were asked, why are you marrying Zubayr? What should be the answer? Genuinely, not the answer. The intention is not what you say, but what drove you. So someone's an environmentalist, right? So you find out about the fact that most of us are wearing unethical clothing. Right? That you know, if right now some angel came and just took away all the clothing that is not, you know, where there's clear injustice involved in the production of the clothing, most of us would be naked. I hope I wouldn't be one of them, because alhamdulillah, I know where my clothing's from. Most of it. I keep my socks even, alhamdulillah. My wife doesn't know how much I spent on the socks. I hope she never finds out. But that's a separate thing. But and not to have ill opinion of anybody, but let's say someone decided to do that. They found out that there's injustice to the workers in most of the clothing we get. There's all the kinds of dyes that are used, etc. There's all kinds of pollution and so on. So I said, I need to change that. I don't want harm to human beings from my clothing. I don't want harm to the environment from my clothing. I don't want economic injustice to whole lands because of that, because of unfair trading practices. So they say, so why are you doing it? They would have all these intentions. Is that a good deed or a bad deed? It's good. But the hadith of intention says it's good, but it's not good enough. Why? Because what should the intention be? That you ask young environmentalists or young Muslim activists, why are you doing this? What should the answer be? Genuinely, what should drive us? What should drive us? Young activists. For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? For the sake of Allah. I'm doing this. Why? Because firstly, you know who you are. You are a servant of Allah. You know your purpose in life. My purpose is to seek the pleasure of Allah. Then the multiple intentions define how will I seek the pleasure of Allah. I will seek the pleasure of Allah by these means. So it's a means, right? These are, the multiple intentions are the means of how I will seek the pleasure of Allah by this action. So it flips the narrative. Allah is not just an anecdote in our work, but Allah comes first, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes first. So likewise with seeking Islamic knowledge, right? Someone says, so why are you learning Arabic? So I've always wanted to learn Arabic. Why? To understand the Quran, to be able to read Islamic books. Why do you want to do that? Well, because if I understand the Quran, if I can understand the Quran, I'll get more of the meaning. Why do you want to do that? So I can pray better. Why do you want to pray better? Because it's obligatory. I'll have greater reward. Why do you want greater reward? Somewhere buried deep within is an intention for the sake of Allah. Right? But the more buried it is, the less transformative the action will be, both spiritually and in reward. Why should you learn Arabic?
To get closer to Allah for the sake of Allah.
Yeah, for the sake of Allah. How will you draw closer to Allah? Through better understanding the Quran, through better understanding, to be able to pray better, to be able to understand Islamic text so you can learn and act on it. You can have many intentions, but we need to train ourselves to make intentions, right? And initially it requires takalluf. It requires a little bit of effort on our part, right? A little bit of effort that we have to think it through. We have to kind of not fake it, but what needs a certain amount of deliberation, right? A certain amount of deliberation. Okay, I need to make an intention. I need to work on my intention. But then it becomes more natural. Anyone like coffee over here? had made an intention to make you guys coffee, but then I didn't. Sorry.
And I want to reward you for intention.
It was a weak intention. I was kind of lazy. And I had to, it was either make the coffee or print out the handout. So I said I'll print the handout. So why should you drink a cup of coffee?
Just for the sake of coffee.
No, no.
It doesn't give any benefits.
I'll teach you some dope. Yeah. Why would you drink coffee?
Be
Alert.
attentive.
No.
Alert.
Why would you drink, or forget coffee, why would you drink a cup of tea? Okay. Someone likes tea. That's the secret love, right? You like a good cup of Darjeeling tea. We call it champagne of teas. Okay. Anyone had that Darjeeling tea, by the way? Yeah. Of course, most people haven't experienced Darjeeling tea. And the problem being that Darjeeling tea is not really a black tea. It looks like a black tea, but because of several reasons, like if you have Darjeeling tea, don't use boiling water. Try water that's about 190 Fahrenheit, and then you'll experience Darjeeling tea. Okay? But that aside, why would you drink a cup of tea?
So you drink it for the sake of Allah, then you could do things with the energy from that.
There's not much energy from it, but yeah. So again, sometimes we'll drink the tea because we like it. Then we might once in a while feel a little bit of gratitude, right? Sometimes, and then we thank Allah for it, for example, right? But the righteous believer implements this idea of sincerity of intention in everything. Even the hadith of intention tells us about our work. Whoever's migration was for some worldly matter that they sought to attain. Then their intention, or a woman they sought to marry, their intention was for whatever they migrated for. Why? Because what could you have intended through the trade? Hadith saying that you got whatever you intended. But it's pointing us that what should you, when you went to that work, you went on a business trip, what should you have intended?
For the sake of Allah.
For the sake of Allah. How? By the multiple intentions, right? By the intention to earn a lawful living, to have the money to spend it on the good, to be, to not to, all the kinds of intentions, but you make the intention for Allah primary. Same when you get married. It happened to one of the companions. They used to make joke with him that he's Muhajir Qais. Okay? That he's the one who migrated for Qais. Qais was a female, she was a companion of the Messenger ﷺ. This man went to her and said, I want to marry you. She said, he claimed that I'm a person of religion and religious concern, etc. Said, well, if you're serious about it, migrate to Medina and we'll get married there. So he migrated from Mecca to Medina. What was his intention? He migrated to marry a righteous woman. Is that a good intention?
Good. Yeah.
It's good. But what's the problem with the intention?
No primary.
So what's the problem with the intention?
Less reward.
Let's give this a search. What's the problem with that intention? Go ahead. What's the problem with, he migrated, went from Mecca to Medina, presumably on foot, to get married to a righteous woman. What's the problem with the intention?
It's the third level intention because it's more for the worldly reason.
Yeah. So it's a weaker intention. It's a good intention. You sought to do something good. But you put that first and you made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala secondary in your intention. So we need to practice, and it takes effort. anything that one does in one's religion, particularly, like in acts of worship, but also in things that are done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as seeking knowledge or activism, but also worldly matters. You went and purchased mangoes. I felt guilty because I was about to buy some mangoes for my family. I got lazy. Because, actually, I got either lazy or afraid. I got afraid because the place I was buying it from, if my wife found out, she wouldn't be too happy. It was a pawn shop. I saw these mangoes. But then I found out that my nephew purchased mangoes. I don't know if he paid for them. Did he pay for them? Okay. Well, my nephew purchased mangoes for my sister's family. Like, yes. But, you could just buy mangoes for the sake of you like mangoes or your family likes mangoes. You eat them, you have some level of gratitude. It's very different when you buy the mangoes seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Why? And then you think of multiple, out of gratitude that Allah has blessed you with wealth. And you think of multiple ways that you will seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your purchase of mangoes.
The hadith mentions for Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so how do we factor that?
For the sake of Allah and His Messenger, they say, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one's purpose, and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the means. As the means in what sense? In the means in that one does it in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
The mutaba.
Yeah, out of mutaba'a, out of following the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because, because there's many sunnahs related. You intend, to spend on your family. So for the sake of Allah, how? Through so many different ways. So, to bring happiness to the heart of another. You remember that the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that when the Prophet ﷺ said, if you get fruits for your family, share some with the neighbors. Right? So you got a dozen mangoes, so it gets to eat to your neighbors. Right? Or whatever. So that's intention overall, right? That the hadith of intention is very, very critical. Right? And we often hear about it, but it's easy to overlook its critical implications, right? To overlook its critical implications. Now, let's look at that with respect to seeking knowledge, right? To seeking knowledge. So we seek knowledge of our religion for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then that's very abstract. Right? That's very abstract. So the question is, how do I seek the pleasure of Allah through my seeking of knowledge? So what would some of the intentions be in seeking knowledge of the religion? From the sisters? I'm seeking knowledge for the sake of Allah, lillahi ta'ala, but how? I have to start picking up. Like, how will you seek the pleasure of Allah through your knowledge? Go ahead.
By improving our acts of worship.
By improving our acts of worship, right? By improving our acts of worship. How else?
By understanding Allah's religion, implementing it on ourselves.
To better understand and to better implement. Okay? How else? How else would we have? Go ahead.
After I implement and understand, I would like to teach others too.
Yeah, to be able to convey it to others. How else?
Through having more sincerity.
Through having greater sincerity. And Because it's knowledge that shows us how to better act outwardly, but also inwardly, to have greater sincerity. What else?
To be able to know and avoid things that will make Allah unhappy.
Yeah, to be able to, you have to know in order to avoid that which is displeasing to Allah, but to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what is taqwa? Taqwa is awareness that results in caution and restraint. To keep oneself away from what is displeasing to Allah and to uphold what is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So that's a very noble intention. Right? And there's many other intentions, right? Of reviving the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in one's own life, but also with others. And to convey the prophetic guidance, to call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any other intentions from the sisters?
To preserve the deen?
The preservation of the deen. And that's one of the most critical things, right? The preservation of the deen.
To know Allah's oneness, like to know actually who Allah is through that knowledge.
Yeah, to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One seeks knowledge to better know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to increase in one's knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything else?
To understand.
Let's, but it's
To instill that knowledge in your children and family.
yeah, to convey that, and particularly because one has a higher level of responsibility with respect. Your first responsibility is to yourself, then to your household, right? To your household. So to instill that in one's children, right? The best Islamic education you can give your child is it's to educate yourself. Right? The best Islamic education you can give your child is to educate yourself, so that you can then educate your child, right? Because imagine, so many people send their kids to Quran class, but the parent can't really recite the Quran properly. The child never sees the parent reciting the Quran. So they have a class and an anti-class, right? Right? Because they go to a Quran teacher who teaches them, and they go home and their parents are teaching them disregard for the Quran. So it kind of almost cancels itself out, right? So that's very, very important, right? That we learn for these many motives. Now, how does one gather one's intentions, right? How does one gather one's intentions? The ulama found that it helps people, right, to summarize the intentions for them so that they can practically implement having these high intentions. So what they do, right, is they very often gather the intentions for particular matters. And there's a beautiful book, now it's recently been republished. It's called the Book of Intentions. And you'd be shocked at the number of good intentions you can have for any particular thing. We came to what are the intentions for attending a class of Islamic knowledge? What are the intentions for reciting Quran? Right? So at one level, the intention for attending class of knowledge is for the sake of Allah. But there are numerous ways we can make intentions. So we'll be sharing with you a beautiful, brief statement of intent for seeking Islamic knowledge by one of the great late scholars of Islam, Imam Abdullah bin Alawi al-Haddad. During Ramadan, we covered a book by Imam al-Haddad called the Book of Assistance, which is a guide on how we incorporate the Sunnah outwardly and inwardly in our lives. It's an amazing work. Ustad Amjad Tarsim, I'm going to say rahimahullah. May Allah have mercy on him, but in good ways. He's very much alive and kicking and is giving salam to everybody. But Ustad Amjad primarily, and myself, we covered that during Ramadan. And this aspect, right? He summarizes that nawaitu at-ta'alluma wa ta'lim. I intend in my seeking of knowledge for the sake of Allah, to at-ta'allum wa ta'lim, to learn and to teach. وَالنَّفْعَ وَالْإِنْتِفَاعَ, right? And to benefit myself and to be able to benefit others. And وَالْحَثَّ عَلَى التَّمَسُّكِ بِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَسُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ, and to encourage myself and others to hold fast to the book of Allah and to hold fast to the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And وَالدِّلَالَةَ عَلَى الْخَيْرِ, and to point to myself and others towards all that is good, right? And ابتغاء مرضات الله, seeking thereby the good pleasure of Allah, وقربه ورضوانه, and His closeness and good pleasure, right? So this intent is a brief intention, but it summarizes all these meanings really well. So many of the scholars would say that to get accustomed to making a high intention, to make it a practice, to just state that intention, right, as a means of focusing one's motive on one's primary intention, which is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And stating the intention is not required itself, because the intention is what is in the heart. But sometimes it can help focus the intention just to say it as a means of pronouncing the intention. And the vast majority of Islamic scholarship affirm that this is praiseworthy, when it is a means to gathering one's intention. So one of the, in the 7th Islamic century, a distinguished scholar and his student both objected to this. That this is a bid'ah, this and that. But then the people who came after said, yeah, it's a good innovation. Right? Why? Because it helps one formulate the intention. So it's not called in itself. Like I find if I say the intention, I get all confused. Right? But just to pause and to gather one's resolve, whether you utter it or not, that's up to you. It can really help. So we'd encourage to work on that. Right? That anytime you begin reading a book, or attending a class, or listening to a talk, like you're watching some cat that was celebrating the Raptors' victory, right? Some random YouTube video, and suddenly you see some video about Sheikh Hamza on cats. I don't know if there's a video on Sheikh Hamza on cats, but it came up because the algorithm combined your love for cats and love for Sheikh Hamza, and it found this video. And it's a real video, it's not a deep fake, right? So you're about to click on it. When you click on it, just pause it for a second and make an intention, right? And make an intention, and then listen. And you'll find that your attitude will be very different. They don't just, let's see what, you'll be more attentive, more appreciative, etc. So it requires effort. Right? It requires effort, but this is one of the most important things. Right? That if you kind of ignored everything else and didn't show up, but you took this one thing seriously, it's more important than anything else that we cover. That always work hard on your intentions. In your worship, in anything you do religiously, and this is the most critical area. The two areas where intention is most important, number one is our acts of worship. Our prayer, our fasting, our zakat, etc. Right? That their intention is absolutely obligatory. The second area where intention is critical, because these are religious acts, is anything that is done seeking knowledge or of activism, of areas where you are serving others in matters of religion. Particularly, here too, intention is obligatory. Right? So one is our acts of devotion, the other things are those worldly acts that are done directly for religious purposes. Right? And much of the trouble we have in our community and so on would certainly be diminished and calmed down if people kept this in mind. Okay? That whether you're seeking knowledge, or you're teaching, or you're lecturing, or you are involved in an Islamic project, anything that is done primarily for the purpose of religion, intention there is obligatory. It's obligatory, because these are matters in which you are acting on the behalf of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ directly. Right? And one should treat it that way, that you are, in these matters, an ambassador of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. Right? Then we have worldly matters. Right? So there's religious matters, which are our acts of devotion, and those things that are done for religious purposes. Right? Their intention is obligatory. Someone's giving a khutbah. Why am I giving a khutbah? I was asking. And it's like a swing and a miss. Right? Then there's worldly matters. Does Zubayr have to have a sincere intention in marrying Zubaydah? Does he? No. So why does he marry Zubaydah? Eventually, his father died. Her father died, Uncle Jamil. Zubayr moved to Botswana. They're both 55, and she comes up again. She never married, said, please marry me. I was waiting for you. He now gave up on the thought of marriage. He just married her just so that she'd leave him alone. Right? Was he sinful for marrying her? No. It's a worldly action. But he missed out on great reward. He missed out. Do you have to make a sincere intention in your work? No. But you missed out on the reward. And you missed out on the reward. So, in worldly matters, you have to make a sincere intention before drinking your coffee. No. But you missed out on great reward. Right? And that too is loss. That's loss. You lost out. Okay? You visited your relatives on Eid. Why do you visit them? Because it's Eid. So why do you visit them? Because they're my relatives. So why do you visit your relatives? And if you think about it, much of our family life, a lot of people are miserable about it. If you think about it logically, why do you visit your family? Because they're family. So what is the logical statement? I visited my family because they're family. So why did I visit them? Because they're my family. Is that a very fulfilling exercise? No. Whereas if you think about it, right? So their intention is not obligatory, but you miss out. You miss out. Right? In our work, in our family life, in any worldly service that we do, right? You're involved in save the bees. Why do you want to save the bees? Because I always loved the bees. Okay, good. And there's some good in it, right? But make a higher intention than that. And it'll be much more transformative for you and much more sustainable. Much more sustainable. Right? Because otherwise, it's just a fickle intention. You'll do it for a little while, then you leave it. And also, in our personal interests. Personal interests. For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And one of the intentions in that, one is gratitude, and one is to give oneself a break for the sake of Allah. Relaxing for the sake of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ said, رَوِّحُ الْقُلُوبِ heart's rest, which of course means that you work your hearts hard, that you're actively involved. When you give yourself a break, whatever it is, off the permissible, you do that for the sake of Allah, to give yourself a break, to relax. And that too is an act of worship. You don't have to do anything Islamic about it. You just want to relax. Right? That too. So I'm reading a novel. Why are you reading a novel about whatever random thing? A suitable boy. For the sake of Allah. What does the novel have to do with that? To relax for the sake of Allah. And there's many other intentions there too, but that too can be for the sake of Allah. If it can't be for the sake of Allah, then don't do it. Okay? Then, in that case, one wouldn't do it. Any questions here?
I had a question, something from previous, I believe it was a minor shirk that how you associate with Allah in His worship.
Yeah.
Can you give an example? I just want to be clear on that.
So lesser shirk is when you act with ulterior motives. Right? Lesser shirk is when you act with ulterior motives. You did it for the sake of Allah and for something else. Right? So in worship, for example, finally, you didn't muster the courage to talk to Zubayda's father, Uncle Jamil. So Zubaydah was reading the life of the Prophet ﷺ, so she said, look, Sayyidah Khadija approached the Prophet ﷺ. She told her family she took all these, brilliant woman. I'm going to do that. How am I going to do it? She talked to her father that Zubayr prays at such and such masjid, go talk to him. So Zubayr's praying his sunnah there, and Uncle Jamil walks by. Now suddenly, he stands up straighter. Why did he stand up straighter? Uncle Jamil's a tough Afghani. He would have been a tribal lord, right? Or tribal whatever they're called. So now why did he do that? Why did he straighten up and look down and make his recitation longer? That's
Impress.
yeah. So there's you did it for Allah and for the sake of Uncle Jamil. So that's problematic. That's problematic. So it's not he didn't worship Uncle Jamil, but it's a lesser shirk because it's ishrakun niyyah. Like you had an ulterior motive in that. The right thing to do when something like that happens, you take a reminder that I should be praying better for the sake of Allah. If you pause for a second, but you correct your intent. I'm going to pray properly for the sake of Allah. And the person just reminded you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I'm struggling a little bit with understanding the top two levels of intention. Because
Yeah.
when we say, even the top intention, when we say purely for Allah Ta'ala alone, seeking His love, His closeness, and His good pleasure, that if on one hand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of our acts of worship,
Yeah.
then isn't even seeking His closeness kind of for ourselves? And how do we differentiate that?
Yeah.
between that and the second?
No, because Allah does not need anything from us, but Allah deserves it, right? To quote Sayyidina Rabi al-Adawi again, she said, addressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أُحِبُّكَ حُبَّيْنِ حُبَّ الْهَوَى وَحُبًّا لِأَنَّكَ أَهْلٌ لِذَا. I love you with two loves, the love of yearning and a love that befits you, right? So the So of course, there's a theological difference about this, but that is a purer intention. Why? Because who are you? Right? You are created as a servant of Allah. You owe Him your existence. All that you have is from Allah. Right? So the theologians would tell us that that shukrul mun'im wajibun. Right? Gratitude for the one who bestows a blessing upon you is necessary. One school of Islamic theology says it is wajibun shar'an. It is necessary religiously because Allah commanded it. Because there's no obligation except by divine command. Allah commanded it. But certainly the Maturidi theologians, and most of the Hanafis were Maturidi, they said it's rationally necessary too. The sound intellect, if it considered that if someone gave you a gift, the sound mind would affirm that gratitude is required there. Right? So you worship Allah out of that meaning of gratitude. If you consider who is Allah, then you would seek these three qualities. And we look at that as we study Aqidah, but that it is the oneness of Allah entails loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To know Him is to love Him. Right? Because if you realize who is Allah, then it entails yearning for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. Those who believe, those who truly believe, are most intense in their love of Allah. So knowing who is Allah, knowing Him with His names and attributes entails the yearning that is love. It entails seeking His closeness. But seeking His closeness is the reality of your relationship with Allah. Okay? And we'll see that what is the reality? إِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If my servants ask you regarding me, I am indeed near. So the existential reality is that Allah is close to you, you are close to Allah. Right? So what's the problem? It's not that Allah is far and we have to travel to closeness to Him. Attaining the closeness to Allah is a dropping of delusion. Right? لَيْسَ الْحَقُّ بِمَحْجُوبٍ عَنْكَ. Right? It is not Allah who's veiled from you. إِنَّمَا الْمَحْجُوبُ أَنْتَ. Right? You are the one who's veiled from the reality of the closeness to Allah. By the veils of our sins, our shortcomings, and our heedlessness. Okay? But the reality is, نحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد. We are closer to them than their very lifeblood. Okay? وهو معكم أينما كنتم. He is with you wherever you may be. So realizing the closeness to Allah is just seeing things right. Okay? It's just what faith entails, right? But the question is a very intelligent question. That can you be absolutely sincere? Can you be absolutely sincere? Right? Or is there always ulterior motives? Can there be pure love? Can there be pure love? Okay? And that's a complicated question. Think about it. But Jabir the ulama said the nature خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. The human being has been created weak. Right? Purity, like purity of intention, purity of love, right? Purity of gratitude. These we aspire to it, but we always fall short. We always fall short. That's just the nature of the human being. That whatever we do, we fall short of what Allah deserves. What Allah deserves. Right? That's just the nature. That's just the nature of any response of the finite before the infinite. We fall short, which is why when we pray, what's the first sunnah after the prayer? What's the first? We'll do the hands thing. Any of the sisters? We make istighfar. We seek forgiveness. What sin did we commit in our prayer that we're seeking forgiveness? We seek forgiveness for our falling short. We seek forgiveness for our heedlessness. We seek forgiveness for our state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah deserves better. Right? That Allah deserves better, even as well as you worship. Right? So this intention is an important one. Right? So positively, what do? And we'll take a 5-minute pause after this. Positively, the intention requires reflection, right? Reflection, and to gather one's resolve. That we've showed up to this summer intensive, etc. But how do I want to seek the pleasure of Allah? It helps to write it down, right? So we'll be sending you you can find them if you're in a rush on the Seeker's Guidance website. Look, intentions, knowledge, Haddad, Imam Haddad, his intentions for seeking knowledge, but reflect on those, right? But also think, okay, how do I plan to fulfill those intentions, right? In learning, being able to teach, to revive, you have to call myself to the good, to call others to the good, etc. For the sake of Allah, for the sake of His closeness, His love, His good pleasure, right? And any questions there regarding intention? Jazakallah, that was a very good question.
Not really a question about intentions necessarily, but wouldn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love for His, pure love, wouldn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love for His righteous slaves be the only form of pure love? Because He loves them despite not needing to, whereas we always love Him because of some benefit that we receive. Wouldn't that be the only form of pure love?
Yeah. So
in that sense.
Yeah. So that's something the scholars and the righteous and the philosophers and the poets have much of the thought of both philosophers and theologians and lovers has been on the question of love. Okay? And there's different levels of love. Maulana Rumi says that lovers are different. Some love themselves, so they love. Others love loving, so they love. Okay? Others love the idea of love, so they love. Others love the thought of the beloved, so they love. And he said, and few indeed love the beloved. And he says, it's like the example of the one, and of course, don't get bad ideas, guys, who stand at the door of their beloved, and they declare how much they love their beloved. Some people love they realize that I want the good. What's the best thing I can want is love. Like people want to buy the latest smartphone, whatever. What I want is love. Right? So others like the idea of love. Others like the thought of the beloved. It says, but then what happens? What happens when the beloved says, come on in? The beloved welcomes the lover into her chamber. It's all a metaphor, by the way, don't get the wrong idea. Right? There's some people who just stand at the door. Why? Because they're not really concerned about the beloved. They just like the idea of love. Some like the idea of love because they see, oh, where's Zubayr? Oh, he's in love with Zubaydah. He's at her door. Right? So they like the display of love. Because love is dramatic. And some people like drama. Right? Other people will go in, but they're busy with the thought of loving. So the beloved is there, but they're saying, I really love you. I have no thought for anyone but you. So they're still lost in the act of loving, but the beloved is right there. Right? And few indeed are really concerned. So some of the scholars said love is something you can't talk about. Right? Love is something you can't talk about. The more you talk about love, the less sense it makes. It's like honey. Someone who hasn't tasted honey, the more you describe it, the weirder it seems. Right? The only way to talk about love is to experience. But others said, well, their words can approximate. Right? Words can approximate. But we know as believers that we've been commanded to love. Right? We have been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to love, and it's a reality. Right? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us of that love and of the realities of love. Okay, so we're going to take just a 4-minute break, inshallah, just to have some time to stretch. If you want to grab some water, etc.
How are you?
네, kitchen.
Now this is when I get to my car.
Yeah, we've done a lot of ordering the last couple of weeks. What was it? Yeah, with Tahtawi. That's hurt the wall. City Omer is supposed to be Yes, I heard you're busy with Beware or something.
No, I was doing a project, but then yeah, it was nice. Yeah. I had a minor hiatus, but we're back in full force. I could attend the seminar. No, I just wanted to speak. I've been keeping up with some of the
I also heard we're going to go through transactions after the break. What we're doing, we're going to finish, the course.
And I know you're doing the shop.
Wednesday is this month. It's the easier stuff. Like it's not a. It was the first time you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, Milton. On the 401 it's like 50 minutes. Back as far as the north, or the close? Like, yeah, like 15. Same thing? High school? University, second year. Where? Biology. Then my shop, you're using for what program? Yeah. Like biology? Just straight bio? Straight bio?
It's like, it's going to be a specialization in third year.
What does it turn into?
Bioinformatics and computational biology. Like the stats.
So mathematics?
Yeah.
Math? You like that stuff?
Yeah, because I want to like go into like biotechnology. That's like a really big field.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But like, I'm really bad at calculus. So
I'm not good at math either.
I don't know how I'm
an
going to do
engineer,
it.
don't worry about it, bro.
I'm going back to the old
all my
place.
campus courses, I'm not good at math. I think, bro, it just takes a bit of extra stuff. Because I think, especially if you don't like it,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's so many calculus courses, like
So-
screen math 2 and stuff.
Oh, you just speak. That's kind of unlucky, bro. Yeah, just speak
Even
math.
in first year, I had to take calculus 1 and 2 just for like general.
Yeah.
It was hard.
That was not good, bro. I did not put a lot of effort into those courses. I did really bad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. الحمد لله. We talked extensively about intention, and really the purpose is to drive home that concept of always formulating a deliberate intention. Many people talk about the idea of purposeful action, right? Right? Purposeful action or mindful action. But as a believer, we have high purposeful action, which is that whatever we do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that's something that applies to seeking knowledge. And similarly, do an inventory of your life, right? That what do I do in life, and how do I formulate higher intentions? Most things that we do that are permissible, we can continue doing, right? But we can do them with a higher set of higher purpose. And of course, then you also realize then that some things maybe I shouldn't be doing, or I could be doing in a smarter way, right? That and everyone can reflect on that, isn't that? So now, in terms of the subjects that we're covering, we will be, we hope to have it ready and printed for this week, but we'll be sharing with you, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, a binder with the for each of the 4 topics that we're covering next week, with the lesson breakdowns and also the text that we're covering for each, so you can follow along. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. It's very encouraged to take notes, because that's one of the ways to retain knowledge. So just to go through each of the subjects that we'll be looking at, just touching upon some of the keys of it. The first thing that we're covering is a text that's very dear to me, because it's one of the first texts that I studied when I went to Damascus. And it's a poem in the science of Islamic beliefs. And the scholars realized that there's benefit in summarizing a topic into what they call a method, a summary text, or what in the Western tradition often they refer to as a primer, right? And these gather the issues related to a text, right, without all the discussions. And these are very helpful because they give us a skeletal framework for our understanding. They give us a skeletal framework for our understanding. And I thought that sounds really cool, but since studying this text, and I still remember the day of the first class, I no longer have the book that I studied it in, because a friend of mine had a class. He said, "Faraz, can I borrow your copy of Sawi's commentary on Jawharat al-Tawheed?" "Why?" "I have a class starting in..." "Okay." "So where is it?" He just sort of said, "Okay, I'll bring it back." He didn't. And that's okay, because that's what friends do. But really, the beauty of these primers is that since then, I've been teaching online for 18 years. Pretty much any issue, that you may think about or that arises in the science of Islamic beliefs or related to beliefs, it's either mentioned in the text or the root of the issue, right, where you can think through it yourself is in the text. So this is the power of these, of these summary texts. They give us a framework for our understanding, right? And as you look through the text, you'll see some things that you wonder, why do they mention this? And as we see, we won't be able to go into a lot of detail, but some of the things are quite curious. That according to us, a thing is something that exists. وَعِنْدَنَا الشَّيْءُ هُوَ الْمَوْجُودُ. Like, what's the big deal about that? There actually is a big deal about that. It has both theological implications with respect to understanding the Quran. It also has practical implications in matters, in some of the abstract matters related to how we understand things. What is a thing? Okay, so to give something, we may not realize its implications now, but as we further our knowledge, you see all this discussion, at least you see people are saying all this thing about, well, things are whatever you make them to be. We have a principle related. You may not remember the details of it, but it gives you an anchoring. Right? It gives you an anchoring. So this text is 144 lines. People would classically memorize it. I was told to memorize it by my teachers. And if anyone does want to memorize it, they're welcome to, and we can listen to their memorization. It helps retain knowledge, but we're going to look at it firstly at the core Islamic beliefs. But in his introduction, he discusses the issue of faith. And what is faith? How is faith obligatory? Why is it obligatory to believe? Does faith increase and diminish? Is it enough for us to simply believe because our parents believe? Like, why are you Muslim? Because my parents are Muslim. Why do you believe in Allah? Well, my parents do. What is the role of understanding when it comes to faith? So some of these investigations, which are very pertinent in our times, also to look a little bit at what are some of the proofs related to belief, right? And the role of reflection, of nadar, in cultivating faith. And then what's necessary, possible, and absurd to affirm for Allah, and likewise for His prophets. And then some of the transmitted beliefs, and he puts many issues related to matters that are of religious significance. That what is the role of dua, for example? Right? Is dua answered? Right? What is the reality of miracles, for example, etc. So there's many of these issues, and at the end he also talks about many of the things that we require to nurture faith. Right? So this is the first text we'll be covering. The second part of the class will be which is the Ajrumiyya in Arabic grammar. The Ajrumiyya is a brief text, but it's very comprehensive. It's very comprehensive. Pretty much all the principles of Arabic grammar are contained in it. Another thing that I heard Sheikh Hamza mention that in the mid-90s, and I have to admit I was a terrible student. If I had a student like I was back then, I would have dismissed them, or because we're kind of more we like the idea of learning, but we're a bit more busy with activism than with active learning. So Sheikh Hamza mentioned this. Everything you need to know about grammar is there in the Ajrumiyya. Like a tiny little text. Like, how could everything be there? Because knew that these big books as well, like they must have something else to say, but really, all the core principles of Arabic grammar are there. So what we're going to do, however, is to look at the core of Arabic grammar, because there's essentials of Arabic grammar, and then there's details. And in studying anything, you need to, first like how do you build, like if you ask a scholar, how do you build a table? Okay? They say, well, you have to break it down into parts. Firstly, build a sound table. Now what do you need for the table to stand? And then deal with the details. So there's two parts. Right? First thing is, make it sound. And then put in the details. Right? So what is the key? What is the fundamentals of Arabic grammar? And then there's secondary details. Because there's no point worrying about exception, like an exception, or about secondary components of a sentence when you're still shaky on the sound sentence. And the science of, in Arabic grammar, there's two core sciences. There's nahu and there's sarf. Sarf looks at words and the forms of words. And non-Arabs generally begin by looking at sarf. Generally. Why? Because logically words come before sentences. The Arabs generally neglected sarf. So they get it they rely on intuition. But because Arabs rely on intuition, most of the great grammarians, both of sarf and nahu, were non-Arabs. Pretty much all of them. Not all, pretty much all of them, but a large body of the grammarians were non-Arabs. Which gives us hope as well. Many of them actually mastered Arabic at a later age. Sarf looks at individual words. So you have, for example, the root khalusa, kha, lam, sad. So sarf looks at the different forms of it. Right? So you have the word, the fa'ula pattern, khalusa, yakhlusu, khulusan. Right? For example, akhlasa, yukhlisu, ikhlasa. The different forms. Right? Takhallasa, yatakhallasu, takhallusa. And each of these conveys different meaning. So they look at the various forms, right, of individual words and the meanings that arise from the different patterns. Okay? So there's the word for kissing is from the same root as the word for facing the qibla and for the backside. No, actually for the front private parts. All three have the same root. Because how do you say kissing? What's the word for kissing in Arabic? The verb qabbala, right? Is to kiss. Right? Qabbala. The word for the front private part is the qubul. And the word for facing the qibla is istiqbal. Right? And these are different forms of the same root meaning. Qabala, which is the idea of something being face to face. Right? So qabbala, because you gave your face to someone else's face, and something else happened, and the kiss happened. That's qabbala. The qubul is a noteworthy front part of your body. Right? The qubul. And istaqbala, the istaf'ala pattern, right? The form has a sense of seeking to face or actually facing the direction of the qibla. The qibla is the direction that is faced. It's from the same root. Istaqbala al-qibla. Qibla is from qabala. So sarf looks at words. And it's quite scientific actually, because there's a root meaning, there's a form, and from that, meanings arise. So even when you don't know what a word means, you can kind of get what is the sense of the word from the form, even if you don't know its meaning. So that's sarf. We won't be looking at sarf. Right? Sarf is dead boring for most adults. Right? But basically, all you can do with sarf to begin with is to memorize a whole bunch of charts. And the Western nafs hates memorizing. We want to understand. Right? So the Arabs would argue that you need to just pay attention to the forms as you engage with grammar, etc., and it'll come. And so we'll be touching upon it slowly. Bismillah. The other science of Arabic grammar is nahu, right? Which looks at the sound sentence. Right? Arabs spoke in sentences. Right? Sound speech is speech that is made up of sound sentences. Okay? And the grammarian, they don't care what you're trying to say, just say it correctly. Right? The scholar of sarf is concerned, okay, is that the right form of the word? Right? If you say قبلت القبلة, I kissed the qibla, you'll be like, you're nuts. Right? 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 And it can get, quite grotesque if you get the form wrong. Right? The word for intercourse is from the same root as the word for congregational prayer. So one of our, at university, we had this teacher who was a very interesting teacher, because he used to be a smuggler. He used to smuggle clothing from Turkey into Germany. But then he repented from it. But he studied with the students of one of the major controversial figures of the 20th century. And he taught us some stuff that ended up being all over the place. He got married. So my friends almost got decked by this teacher. He says, instead of saying now you can pray in congregation at home, because he lived in the part of North York that there's no masjid. He ended up saying, so now you can engage in intercourse. And it was in front of everybody, and it was that far away from getting a knockout punch. So that's sarf takes care of individual words. But Nahu looks at a sound sentence, right? At a sound sentence. And a sound sentence basically is of two types. In Arabic, there's only two types of sentences at a fundamental level. There's a nominal sentence, which is a sentence whose key components are nouns, right? Are an ism. It's called a jumla ismiya. So you see how a jumla ismiya works and the key components of that. That's one concern. And to be able to identify if this is an ism. And there's signs of something being an ism. The second component is the verbal sentence, right? The jumla fi'liya, whose fundamental is a fi'l and a fa'il, or that which takes the place of the fa'il. A verb and the fa'il, the doer, the one who engages in the meaning of the verb, or that which takes its place. And the things related to identifying, okay, this is a verb, and the immediate circle of things that affect nominal sentences and verbal sentences. And then I don't know what happened. I think you guys, it should say key components of a sentence. got cut off. Apologies. That's probably when I was thinking of making coffee. So that's the Ajrumiyya. Now, classically, people would memorize the Ajrumiyya, and we have students here who memorize the Ajrumiyya too. It's a really the last 700 years or so of Islamic history, it's been the footstep into the study of Arabic grammar in much of the Muslim world. Particularly in the Arab lands, right? The Eastern lands, they had a slightly different approach. Like you see India or the Persian lands, they had their own approach to Arabic grammar, a much more technical approach. But the Ajrumiyya is what certainly the Arabs and in much of Africa they focused on. So that's what we'll be covering, inshallah, over the summer session is roughly 10 weeks. We'll be looking at the Ajrumiyya in its core components. A key to the Ajrumiyya is really to pay attention, number one, to the examples, and to understand the concepts, to try to diagram it. To try to diagram it. It's very, very helpful. And it helps the concepts stick. And it's structured in a diagramming friendly way. It's structured in a very diagramming friendly way. So that's the Ajrumiyya. Alhamdulillah, we now have a booking. Sheikh Yusuf Welch and Sheikh Halima, who happen to be husband and wife, they're coming here to Toronto on July the 8th. They're only going to come in August or late August, so it's because of Sidi Hamid Ali. He said, just tell them to come right after Ramadan. I said, I can't tell them that. They just mention it. I told them, look, we're fine with you coming end of August. Can you come in the beginning of August? But Sidi Hamid is saying, why don't you just come right after Ramadan? I said, but I'm not asking you to. And they felt very guilty and so on. Then they said, okay, we'll come early July. So they're coming. They were teaching in rural Mexico, but they're moving. So one of the things that they'll be doing in September is we're launching a structured Arabic program for Seekers Guidance online. Bifadlillahi ta'ala, and I've been courting him for years. The teacher that I studied Jawharat al-Tawheed with, the text number 1 for Islamic beliefs, Sheikh Mu'min al-Annan. I did a video, I think 2 years ago, about that. I finished teaching the text over here a couple years ago, and actually starting it for intermediate level students. We're covering the commentary on Jawharat al-Tawheed on which day is it?
Hasn't yet.
Yeah, it'll be starting soon. Here, that was with Sheikh Mu'min al-Annan. He is one of the world's top experts in teaching Arabic as a second language. And he's actually author of one of the most popular textbooks in teaching Arabic as a second language called Lisan al-Um, the mother tongue. So he'll be deploying our Seekers Arabic curriculum, but he'll also be laying down the curriculum that'll be taught here. But that's a full Arabic program. The purpose of the Arabic grammar section here is to familiarize ourselves with Arabic grammar per se. But it'll be very helpful as we enter into a formal study of Arabic grammar. Any questions here? Any of the sisters?
Is that only online, the September classes which will?
No, we'll be doing them here. So
In
Sheikh
person?
Yusuf and Sheikh Halima will be one of the things they'll be doing is they'll be teaching the Arabic Quran. Might get stuck doing some part of it. I try to get away with teaching as little Arabic as I can.
And so what would be like the schedule? Would it be like daytime or?
No, I mean they'll be friendly for people working or at school, etc. There'll be evenings or weekends. Oh, okay, so that's Saturdays. Sundays, we'll be covering again this idea of a primer, a matan. We'll be covering a text called Ithaf al-Talib. My aspirational hope was to translate the whole text in advance. Didn't happen. But we will be covering it in... The text has three parts, like many texts do, because based on the Hadith Jibreel, our religion has three broad dimensions. Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. Iman being our beliefs, Islam being our submission, which is the primary mode of submission is our acts of worship, or fiqh more broadly, and Ihsan is spiritual excellence. So this text is by a very distinguished scholar from the town of Al-Ahsa in modern-day Saudi Arabia, which is a very unique town because for hundreds of years, all four schools of Sunni Islam have been actively taught there for centuries. For centuries, and it's a small town. Ahsa is not a big city, but there's a beautiful tradition of all four schools of Sunni Islam: the Hanafi school, the Shafi'i school, the Maliki school, and the Hanbali school. All have been taught, and they produce great scholars in each of the four schools. So the author of this text, Ithaf al-Talib, who died approximately 200 years ago, Imam Abu Bakr al-Mulla, was a great Hanafi scholar. He wrote many great works in Hanafi fiqh, like essentially authored a whole curriculum in fiqh. He wrote, this work has a brief section in Islamic beliefs, which we'll be doing very quickly, because on Saturdays we're covering Islamic beliefs anyways, but it recaps some of what we take. It gives us a brief framework for that, but we won't be spending a lot of time on it. The heart of the text is on worship, and the final part is one of the best summaries of Islamic spirituality that you can find, and it's very beautifully done. Imam Abu Bakr al-Mulla, not only was he a great faqih, a great scholar of fiqh, he was also a great scholar of Islamic theology. He was a master of the science of hadith as well. He wrote commentaries on works like the Shama'il of Imam al-Tirmidhi and other works. And he also was noted master of Islamic spirituality. He abridged the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah and commented upon it, and wrote many other works. It's a very beautiful work. But the core we'll be looking at is worship. And now many of you have been, but we're structuring this slightly differently in that I know a good number of you took the STEPS curriculum that we offered slightly over a year. So we're not going to cover the text from beginning to end, but rather we're going to provide the text for you on the set. But we're going to focus on key principles, key issues related to purification, key issues related to the prayer, and to look at the complete prayer as a unit. So we're going to structure it slightly differently. for two purposes. For those who have taken the STEPS curriculum before, this will be a consolidation and review. For those of you who haven't, this will be a good stepping stone in terms of a fuller study of the fiqh of worship. So that was the purpose of putting that in here, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And the fourth section on holding one's tongue, one of the greatest works that any believer should have concern for in Islam is Kitab al-Adhkar of Imam al-Nawawi, the Book of Remembrance by Imam Nawawi. Imam Nawawi gathered over 1,000 hadiths related to dua and dhikr from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now there's many collections of the sunnah du'as and dhikr, but nothing compares to the adhkar of Imam Nawawi. The scholar would say, bi'id dar washtari al-adhkar. Sell your house if you must, but buy Kitab al-Adhkar. You don't need to sell your house. It may trouble you for a payment or two. It's, alhamdulillah, it's been translated now into English. It's available through Firdaus books, etc. It's not, it's a 1,000 hadiths. It's a sizable translation, but it's definitely, it's very, very worthwhile. Imam Nawawi, uniquely, in each section, he mentions the key adab related to that matter. Without going at length, when it comes to the du'as said when visiting the sick, he also shares what are the key adab, what are the key things that people forget related to visiting the sick. The adab of the du'as of the sick person. Again, how does one respond to sickness? And he's deceptively brief in that, but you won't find better advice related to any of these matters. Travel. He shares the du'as on travel, but he asks you, what are the sunnahs? What should the traveler do before they're traveling? And deceptively briefly, he summarizes what the traveler should do before they're traveling. What are the intentions when traveling? What are some of the things that a believer should uphold during their travel? And he shares the du'as and adhkar in a really beautiful manner. So this is a wonderful work, but one of the gems in this work, he has a section on hifdhul lisan, on guarding one's tongue, or holding one's tongue. And if they said that sell your home if you must, like give away all that you have for the sake of this section. Right? Because like this is salvifically consequential. Right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised in the Quran that Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you believe, ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. Be mindful of Allah and say words that are upright. This is a condition. Yuslih lakum a'malakum, and He will rectify for you all your actions. وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ, and Allah will forgive for you all your sins. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا, and whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger has attained tremendous triumph. All if it's conditional or not, oh you believe, have taqwa of Allah, and وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا, say words that are upright. It's a conditional statement. If you do this, if you commit to taqwa of Allah, and you say words that are upright, what is the consequence? يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ, Allah will rectify for you your action. You take care of this, Allah will take care of all the rest. And for those of you who were there and still remember, when we looked at the essentials of halal and haram, we touched upon some of this back then. So this will be a consolidation and expansion on that, but it's something that we need to always remind ourselves of, because it's an important standard. Allah will rectify for you your actions and forgive for you your sins. Because the discipline, the purpose, discipline, and method in restraining one's tongue is the purpose, method, and discipline by which we can uphold taqwa in all other aspects of our life. You want to get rid of any other blameworthy quality, the same purpose, method, and discipline that you use to control your tongue, you can apply the same method in anything else. And you want to curb your overeating, you could do it the same thing. It's a method. So it's very, very significant. So this is why we'll be looking at that from Imam Nawawi's work. We'll be referring to some other things as well. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So that's the thinking behind covering these sections. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And we will be. A number of people have been asking about how does this relate to the steps. So those of you who attended the STEP certificate, and there's a whole number of you here, a few things happened in the last 9 months. So so there's some interruptions in the classes, and a few challenges arose, etc. So in light of that, we have a comprehensive test. I hate tests, but there's one of those things in life that it's like you have to throw out the garbage, and no one loves using the toilet, although with some people you suspect otherwise. But there's something you just kind of have to do in life. So tests are like one of those things. I mean, I enjoyed writing tests, but mainly for the entertainment purpose. Because you look around, it's like you don't need to go watch a movie. Just look at people before an exam. You have comedy and tragedy and drama and suspense and the thriller and adventure, and all of it summarized in the faces of those who are about to write a test, right? It's like the story of life. The only experience you don't have is love, generally, right? So we have a comprehensive test. So those of you who feel you're ready to write that, or you need to review, etc., you can reach out directly to Umar, and we can and we can schedule a time for you to write. You need to schedule a good 2 to 3 hours to write the comprehensive test. But we can explain. So basically, you need to be able to you need to demonstrate an understanding of the core of each of the subjects that we covered. If there's parts that are missing, then all of them are also available online, right? Alhamdulillah, the step 1 certificate, all of it is also available online. So we can just send an email, and we can say it's at an individual level. This is what I feel I understand well. These are areas I need work. How do I work on it? And we can set a timeline to take care of that. For most people, I would presume it would require some review. That's why you have notes and so on. And then we'll be offering the Step 1 certificate again in September. That's part of the reason we're bringing Sheikh Yusuf and Sheikh Halima, is they'll be doing a lot of teaching here as well, and we'll be in September. There's only one of me, and can't possibly do everything. So we'll also be offering some between the various teachers. We're also offering some of the Step 2 classes. We'll be announcing them by August, inshallah, the schedule from September. So those who do wish to continue in their Islamic studies, there's a number of opportunities there. One of the things on the current schedule that fit in that is some of the weeknight classes, such as we're starting a detailed look at the fiqh of worship on Wednesdays, right? For example, and we'll be starting transactions and intermediate from Quduri on Monday. So there's a number of things, but we'll be offering it in a structured and clearly broken down manner in from September, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, with the fall term. So that, hopefully that gives some clarification. There's a few intelligent questions that are asked. I couldn't give, I apologize. I wasn't quite focused enough to give an intelligent answer, or semblance of an intelligent answer before, but hopefully that answers some of the questions. So basically, if you took the steps certificate before, and I know many of you attended most of it, few of you attended all of it. Uncle Romani, the grumpy uncle, would wonder what was going on, but that's all good. We have a comprehensive that you can take, so we can come up with a plan, an individualized plan of how you can review and prepare.
Is it for all the sections?
Yeah, for all the topics. Yes.
And then the second question is, Sheikh Yusuf Walsh, was he here? Is that the same?
Yes, Sheikh Yusuf was the same Sheikh Yusuf that came to the Coffee and Connections. Yes. Alhamdulillah. And his wife will also be teaching, Sheikh Halima. She graduated from madrasa in Singapore, and then completed her hifz after that in Singapore, and then she studied for 6 years full time at Dar Zahra in Tarim. I feel semi-guilty because they're teaching, they decided to teach in a rural community in Mexico, in the Chiapas region, for the summer. And I ended up disrupting their plans. But inshallah, we have good intent. They chose to come early, which is good. I didn't force it, but I still do feel a little bit guilty, but let's benefit from them when they come, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So those are, any other questions, inshallah, or clarifications that you needed? So, I apologize a little bit about the arrangements. We're still settling in. We only got the keys literally mid-Ramadan. So the main hall, which I'm not allowed to, because now there's active construction taking place. So yesterday I let some people in. Apparently it's dangerous to do so because there's like all kinds of things loose and someone could have gotten hurt. But, so inshallah, we need, if there's 3 weeks to a month to have the main hall ready and so on. We're in the process of getting we have the fancy ground chairs and stuff. So those are coming. Just be a little bit patient with us.
On Mondays, we've got the 5 to 7 for the Quduri's Muqtasar for transactions.
Yeah.
So how about the ones that you started on marriage and
So we're finishing off the marriage first.
Okay.
I fudged it a little bit because the ulama refer transactions. They refer to both monetary transactions, which are financial transactions, but mu'amalat refers to all human dealings. So technically, in that sense, divorce is a human dealing too. So we're finishing off that. Some people find the chapters on divorce the most exciting chapters in fiqh. Because it's quite dramatic, especially some of the expressions, ways that people, but it is morbid as well. I know someone who gave up seeking Islamic knowledge when they got to the chapters on divorce. I said, why? Because I got so depressed. Right?
So that's going to be covered in the 5 to 7 on Mondays?
Yes.
Okay.
The section on divorce and then the related chapters are not very long, so it's going to be a few weeks, inshallah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So are the tests, if we are emailing you or for the tests, are we going to be doing them individually?
Yes. Yeah. So basic, yeah. So we can just. Any other questions, inshallah? Okay. So, inshallah, we do our best to begin right on time. We don't we strive not to operate on Muslim Standard Time. I guess, so let's try to uphold that, bi'idhnillah. And then so next week we'll be giving the binders with the notes, etc. And if you didn't register, if you registered online, you don't have to register again. You can just go to the link on Eventbrite and just register there. That way, we create a mailing list for the students in the class. So on a weekly basis, sometimes we'll recommend some readings, whatever. So we send we'll send those out. So no further questions?
You said for next week. Does that mean there's nothing tomorrow?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so tomorrow, we will be starting the class 3 and 4, the gifts for seekers, and also on holding what's done, we'll be starting those directly. Because today we wanted to give this this introduction.
So it's just the binders are coming next week.
So it starts at 1 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes. Because the challenge is because there's just with the class structure. One of the other things, especially for the, do look at the other classes. I mean, I know the summer intense is a big commitment, but there's a number of other classes that are running. We are continuing the Coffee and Connections. So I'll be doing it for the next couple of weeks. Then Sheikh Yusuf will be taking over, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And we'll be starting serving coffee tomorrow. And I hope my wife's not here, but I'll be doing how to make coffee demonstrations as well. Okay? So we'll begin by making coffee. And those who are interested in coffee, we did a seminar at the old hub a few years ago called Coffee and the Meaning of Life, which will tell you a little bit about why we talk a lot about coffee. Some of the Turkish spiritual orders, if you wanted to pursue the spiritual path of turning to Allah, they wouldn't accept you in the beginning. Firstly, you'd have to learn how to make coffee. But to learn how to make coffee, there will be stages. There's a wisdom. The Turks are tough people, right? Like the Turks, they're militaristic people. With no offense to any Turks here. Okay. So the first thing you do is you'd serve the coffee. Then there'd be stages. You'd serve the coffee, then you would clean up the coffee, right? Then you would help prepare the materials for the coffee. Then you would grind the coffee. Then you would make the coffee. Then you would pour the coffee. Because pouring is a complicated part of stuff, right? Especially with Turkish coffee. Only once you could do all of this correctly would they allow you to sit and learn. And the idea being that all benefit requires commitment and discipline. Okay? Now, Turks are a bit intense. They take everything very, very seriously. But that's how you do things well. Right? Like I met one of the top calligraphers alive, Ustaz Mehmet Ozjai, and we visited him for some calligraphy pieces that a friend of mine was commissioning. He says, "You know what I'm working on right now?" He says, "There's one verse of the Quran called Sibghatullah." Right? So how are you working on it? So I'm not sure how I'm working on it right now. What are you doing? So I've been preparing for it for the last 2 weeks. So how are you preparing for it? So I've been preparing for it by reflecting on the verse and the meaning of the verse and the attributes related to the verse. Literally, Sibghatullah means the dye, D-Y-E, of Allah. There's no other attributes mentioned. So he was reflecting on the divine names related to that verse. So what about the calligraphy itself? How have you been preparing for that? So I haven't done that yet. For 2 weeks, you just get, there's things, right? Because anything you do well, you have to structure it in the right way. So, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us to benefit from this. بإذن الله تعالى وبارك الله تعالى فيكم. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala اللهم ربنا لك الحمد على ما أنعمت علينا من نعم لا تحصى يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك من الخير كله. Oh Allah, we ask you for the good, all of it. عاجله وآجله. It's immediate and long term. ما علمنا منه وما لم نعلم. What we know of the good and what we're unaware of the good. Ya Rabb al-Alameen, we ask you of the best of what your beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked for, of the good of this life and the good of the next. Ya Rabb al-Alameen, and we seek refuge in you from all that your beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought refuge from, of the harms of this life and the next. Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Allahumma zayyinna bi zinatil iman. O Allah, adorn us with a beautiful raiment of true faith. وَجْعَلْنَا هُدَاةً مُهْتَدِينَ, and make us of those who are rightly guided and who inspire others to guidance. Ya Rabb al-Alameen. We ask you, O Allah, by the words of your beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma ja'alna mafatiha lil khair. O Allah, make us keys for all that is good. Maghaliqa lil shar, and keys to all, and locks against all that is of harm for ourselves and for your creation. Ya Rabb al-Alameen. O Allah, we ask you for mercy for ourselves and our teachers and our parents and our families and all those who have rights over us and all those who have benefited us, and for the entire ummah of your beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask you, O Allah, that we have the reality of religion in having true, sincere concern for you, and true and sincere concern for your book, and true and sincere concern for your messenger, and true and sincere concern for all your creation, Ya Rabb al-Alameen, both those of influence that we hold, that we assist them and call them to uphold their responsibilities, and to the common person that we be of service to them and of benefit to them and of sincere counsel to them, and likewise everything in existence, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. We ask you, O Allah, that you grant us the beneficial knowledge praised by your beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a knowledge of such blessing and benefit that the angels lower their wings in honoring us, Ya Rabb al-Alameen, that the birds in the sky and the animals on earth and even the fish in the oceans pray for us because of the good that we embody and because of the good that we uphold, because of the good that we call to and are a means to, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. And we ask you that you grant us absolutely sincere intentions, Ya Rabb al-Alameen, in our seeking of knowledge and in our devotion and in our work and in our lives and in our interests, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. And we ask you, O Allah, that you ever refine our character, Ya Rabb al-Alameen, so that we may beautify ourselves with the beautiful character of your beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that you make our very inclinations correspond to the beautiful way that he came with and upheld, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. And inshallah, we those of you who've been in the steps past, we don't like nagging about these kinds of things at all. But alhamdulillah, the way Seekers runs, we make all our programs completely free, but we are sustained through regular monthly support. So one of the, if you're able to, if you can become a monthly donor, if you go to seekersguidance.org/Canada, you'll see the option there. That's how we support these services. Our current operational monthly budget, the minimum is minimally $12,000 a month, most of which is for the facility and the other operational costs. we're just short of about 7,000 a month in monthly donations. We have, of course, other other expenses and so on that that we would take on, but that's the minimum budget right now. So if you are at whatever level, whether it's $10 a month or $30 a month or more or less, those consistent donations help us not nag at all. So keep that in mind. We also have an Islamic Scholars Fund that supports the teachers that we bring, such as Sheikh Yusuf and Sheikh Halima, such as Sheikh Badib and others. So neither myself nor Ustad Omar take any compensation or support from Seekers Guidance Canada. But that's something that if you did not pay your zakat or would like to support that's something that's very critical, because there's clearly insufficient teaching taking place in our communities, and our hope in bringing Sheikh Yusuf and Sheikh Halima and Sheikh Muhammad Badib coming back is really to have active teaching here at this center, but also to have active teaching in our community. We're hoping that Sheikh Yusuf and Sheikh Halima will be actively teaching at the various campuses and elsewhere in the community as well, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So